the entire premise that software as a service industry is built on. This is a $1 trillion industry. The whole premise is that code is expensive to write. Well, all of a sudden, that whole idea that code is expensive to write has just been like radically blown up.
Welcome to the Mama Africa Educast. We are here with Drew D'Agostino from Nashville, Tennessee today. He is the founder and CEO of Crystal Knows and also a board member of People Loving Nashville. We're so happy to have you here. Thank you, Drew, for taking the time out to be with us.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So we've been talking a lot about personality since I'm in sort of ed tech and education, and a lot of companies in HR, obviously they want to know about their people, and it's such an important part of the success of a company. But you've had this company for over 10 years, and I'm really curious to hear today, like, what are the things that are on your mind as a founder, how AI is affecting this industry, and yeah, just maybe a little bit about your story. We could maybe start there.
I could do my best to summarize the last 10 years, maybe 60 seconds.
Sure.
So I guess back in 2014, I was I was helping run my first tech company back in Boston with my closest friend. He was the CEO, I was CTO. Long story short, we got fired from our company. And this was something we'd started. So we got fired, we got kicked off the board. We were just two 23-year-olds who really, honestly, we did some good things, but also we didn't really know what we were doing. So this company of like 30 people, we learned really quickly how fast things can just, blow up. So at that time, it was summer. I remember this. Both of us were trying to figure out what to do with our lives. And we kind of knew how we were wired. We had an executive coach at the previous company who had taught us a lot about our own like personality tendencies and communication style. And I saw that in action a lot and how that affected our personal work dynamic, and especially how towards the end of the business, it kind of conflicted with our investors and everything. So I kind of went down this rabbit hole of DISC, which is a personality framework, as well as other, just learning about how we are both naturally wired and then affected by our environment. So I never studied psychology or anything like that. I just went down a rabbit hole as a tech guy because I was the person who was just hacking together apps. So over the next few months, I had a lot going on in my life. I ended up moving down to Nashville from Boston. I had a few projects going on at the time because at the time I knew that there was, definitely could not hold down a regular job. Needed to figure out what to build and how to make money on my own. So I was working on a couple different projects and ultimately launched what is now like the basics of Crystal, which is the business that I've been leading for the last 10 years. At the time, it was only it was just a website that analyzed public data. And for anybody who had information online, we could kind of summarize their personality traits and use a statistical model to show them what their personality traits were, and then how that would impact their communication style and things. And that kind of took off on its own. It wasn't a business. It was barely a website. I mean, it was something that a couple of reporters picked up on. They were really curious about it. It got written up in like Wired and CNN. And I think it hit on a nerve, which now I know it was interesting. I kind of saw like the ChatGPT moment happen, like in this kind of mini version, like 8 years before, because our product couldn't do those kinds of things, but it struck this nerve where people were very curious about it. So then when years later, when all the language models came out, I kind of saw a similar dynamic happen at a much bigger scale. So it was very interesting to see that at the time. Anyway, the business kind of just pulled me in. So I couldn't not work on it. I remember feeling that way at the time. Like, there are 10,000 people a week signing up for this thing. What is that? Why are people so curious about this? So eventually, over a process of, I don't know, maybe 6 months, continued working on that full time, figured out how to pay the bills by like doing some random contracting work, and eventually launched the product, launched the business, tried to be revenue positive from day one, eventually raised some capital from like Salesforce and some other investors. And yeah, that was all like the first year. And then since then, we've been, um, there's a lot of details we can get into depending on where you want to take this, but we've built a profitable business that is not huge. We've 20 something employees. We operate in a pretty like long-term lean way, and with a real core focus on helping businesses understand their customers and employees and really anybody that a business or a professional interacts with. How do you understand them on a really deep level so they communicate better? So that's kind of the goal of our product and the core vision of it.
You have the music background as well that you performed and you taught yourself. Is it the classical music, the piano recently?
Yeah, about 5 years ago, yeah, it was 2025. Yeah, 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I had a medical episode. This is the real story. I ended up in the hospital, kind of came really close to something really bad happening. Like I didn't realize how close to dying I was, but I basically got knocked out of work for like a month, and I just couldn't. My whole schedule was cleared. So I don't know if you've ever been in that like type of situation. Most people don't. As an adult, just to have a totally clear schedule. And I'm not talking about a clear schedule for the week. I'm saying like, oh yeah, I literally have nothing on my calendar indefinitely because the important thing was making sure I survived. so like that was such a unique experience. And I haven't met that many people who've had that. But when I did, it was really interesting what filled the gap because I decided just to take a step back from the company. At that point, this was 2021. So Crystal had been going for about 6 or 7 years at that time. And the team was really strong and I was able to do that. And I just like, I have a piano in my house. I've been a musician for a long time, but never really was into classical music. Just started like learning from Bach, got a Bach book, learning Mozart, Beethoven, kind of went through the timeline. Eventually I fell in love with the romantic era of classical music. So really dove hard into Chopin and Liszt and eventually like Debussy. But I basically took the year, treated it like I was at conservatory and just practiced 8 hours a day on piano for like 6 days a week.
I wrote in some studios there in Nashville where you are. And yeah, I would just vibe out with different people. And then coming into like more education and corporate, you realize if everyone comes to you as like the personality guru because you know how to vibe with people. That's what you're doing when you're writing music, So there's a lot of overlaps. But I think another thing that we also connect on is that we come from a Christian background. And of course, the thing with personality is there is that sort of spiritual element. But I want to ask you, where do you stand on like the spectrum for horoscopes and how? Because I see that's very much entered like mainstream. But where do you stand on that?
I find it really fun. I mean, it's funny how it's entered mainstream. And because we have a business that deals with personality, I get a lot of exposure to it. The support inbox is like, it's really funny sometimes. So when I speak with customers about personality types, I always I was a real skeptic about it earlier because it always seemed a little bit too deterministic. Like how can you, if you're basically ascribing behavior to something that's just innate, like I'm wired this way, therefore this is how I act. You're kind of removing a sense of agency and removing a sense of responsibility from anything that happens to you or things that you do. So that's like whenever you're talking about personality, there's an immature, in my view, way of taking these things and basically letting go of responsibility. This is happening because I am this Myers-Briggs type, or you can go down a horoscope, there's a lot of confirmation bias in these things where you can just read something, it's like, oh yeah, that's happening in my life, or this is why this is happening. And people are always looking for a reason for that. And they're also always looking for a way to explain their own behavior or justify their own behavior. So you have to understand that when you're navigating it within conversations about personality, you always run the risk of that. And that could be for yourself. And then importantly, in the business sense, it can also lead to pretty negative outcomes. Like if you are, say, selecting based on a particular type or something like that. So I always want to make it clear we're navigating those waters. And if you don't have a kind of mature, nuanced perspective on it, you can end up in like that world of horoscopes and as- these things can be misleading at best, manipulative at worst. Um, so we don't want to be living in that world. And certainly for the purposes of our business, we don't want to be building a business on confirmation bias and mystic stuff. Um, Now on the other end, you can just take that and the fact that people misuse personality and immediately throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, you know what, we're going to completely ignore everybody is a blank slate. Everybody has, equal tools and equal tendencies. But we all know as human beings that is not true. We walk through the world and you can, I would, ask any parent about when they started seeing in their child certain tendencies emerge, especially if they have multiple kids. This started at an early age, and many of them don't really change. They kind of evolve as they grow, but a lot of times, if it's so funny how a 2-year-old can start displaying personality traits of like, say, directness or leadership, and that just carries through their whole life. People do change, but it's funny how these things happen. Um, Anybody with siblings can kind of understand this. That dynamic doesn't really change as you grow. It evolves, but the core relationships they're remarkably steady. Um, so we exist in this world where we're either we are born with or we very at a very early age kind of adapt to our environment. It's a combination of both. And if you ignore those tendencies, those things that are very real forces of how we behave, how we communicate, how we make decisions, um, if you ignore those, you are also out of line with reality because they're there. It's kind of like walking through the world, refusing to look at a map because the map might have some inaccuracies. Well,
Yeah.
yes, maps can have some inaccuracies, but it's much better to have a map than not have a map.
So where does tech come in? Like how is the technology helping people across different industries and positions? Like where do you see it's really most effective?
For our product specifically, because I guess I've had the 10 years of experience of observing at this point, I think 3 million people have signed up for it and used it.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a little weird. It's funny when I'm in the airport and have a little sticker on my computer and people are like, oh yeah, I did my personality test on there.
Oh, cool.
Or whatever. So it's all over the place. Personality is universal. Everybody has one. So people use our product for a lot of different reasons. Um, I get so many emails from people that use it for their own personal relationships or for dating or for all this stuff. That's not really where our business is. Um,
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, we've discovered, okay, since we need to build a business and build steady revenue, where does this thing have the actual like real value? Um, of the probably dozen use cases, the one that has emerged as the most valuable it is called, we call it pre-meeting. So pre-meeting research, someone who's either going to client meetings or prospect meetings, or someone who's like doing research for an executive or someone who's going into a meeting, creating like a dossier or a briefing or understanding, basically give me the full background of this person. So that emerged as the best use case of this data. And we decided to kind of double down on that and not change our core product because our core product's all personality, but we decided to build a new product called Premeeting to address that market, which is anybody who's trying to go into a meeting with intent to generate revenue. How do you get the full background of that person and their personality, just like in our core product, but also, what are the career highlights? What are the ways that you connect with them, like the different points in the background? What are some quotes we found online that give you an insight into how they're thinking? Icebreakers to talk about in conversation, those types of things. So that's the most interesting use case from a business perspective. So we've kind of doubled down on that.
I love the one that you sent me. I'm going to read it out. What does it say? Rebecca is a vibrant speaker and educator with a passion for cultural storytelling and educational empowerment in Africa. Discuss her podcast to break the ice. Yeah, but it also takes a lot of effort to like get to the point where your story is prepared in that way, right? My story could go in 5 different directions, but it's helpful to like to center it to where that person's at. And I do this a lot like manually before meetings. It's just
Yeah.
but like analyze and
Yeah.
And people of like an older generation are like, what are you? Like, how do you know that about me? Because you can
Yeah.
read from the
You can
inside.
read it, yeah.
And I think maybe the younger generation are even better. Like I met up with someone in like their early 20s, and she just figured me out so quickly because I think they're exposed to so much information. So they just process much faster.
Here's what I've learned. It's almost like three generations of this, and it's funny. Maybe it's separated by age, but also I just think it's overall approach. So I'll use generalizations of like, you know, the generations. So like the boomer approach to it, it's like most of interactions happen on phone. I learn what I need to, so it's asking questions and not necessarily doing that level of research or using these tools. It's like very, very, you know, relationship oriented business. So it takes more time to build a relationship.
Later.
Yeah, qualitative. Then you get the millennials, which we're both at that cohort where we are very good at stalking people online. So we've just acquired that like because it just happens. Like you knew so many little things about me before I hopped onto this meeting. Like we're just because we've grown up with social media, we it's just natural to us. We just we do that type of research automatically. And then the Gen Zs, I'm finding they're just hacking together ChatGPT and other AI tools. So they're not doing the same manual research. They're just relying on the AI to give information. So I see so many like really interesting prompts about, because playing in this space, you get to observe what people are doing with it and how they're personalized.
You get into the psyche. So
Yeah.
what do you see?
Well, I mean, so when we're bringing our new product into a company, so we're introducing Premeeting into a business that, might be a sales team or something like that. I am seeing right now that a lot of businesses have not really fully they haven't fully adopted AI, but there is one person or a small group on their team who they've kind of had this top-down mandate to say, like, you figure out AI. And it's usually a younger person. So it's someone who's like either in their 20s or early 30s, and they've kind of got this like task where they're putting together all these tools and they have a problem to solve and they're hacking it together. So I've seen folks who are using automations and plugging it into like their HubSpot CRM or Salesforce, and then using that to trigger some kind of agent that's doing some research and putting together a thing that's then sending off a text message to the right person. And it's basically this big web of automations, and it's being hacked together by there's usually one expert, and I try to find that person because that's the person I want to be talking to about implementing things. So they do all, and it's usually tailored to whatever that company's business is and whatever they're trying to really communicate with. So when I find that person, I show them our new product because it kind of professionalizes the process that they're putting together. Instead of like taking the dozen tools and saying, okay, we're going to hack this thing together, that tends to be really brittle and lacks accuracy. We can give them our product, which is a lot of what they're trying to accomplish. It's just a lot more elegant and seamless, and they don't have to, figure all this stuff out on their own. So I see.
Like the ethics of this, because it's obviously sensitive data that you're dealing with. So how do you manage that, or how do you make sure it doesn't affect you, or how do you deal with the data responsibly?
Well, you have to understand that what the difference is between different types of data. So Crystal and now Premeeting, they only rely on public data. So anything that you can find with a Google search is what we can find and analyze. So it's really not sensitive. There's a concept of personally identifiable information. That's like one category of things. And then there's sensitive personally identifiable information as well, which is like if you're dealing with financial information or medical information or any kind of like things that would be not public. Then you also have data that's not necessarily sensitive, but it is guarded by some kind of authentication. So a good example is like LinkedIn data. If you can find LinkedIn data without without authenticating, and it's just the public version of the profile, the user has opted in to make that public. Therefore, it's kind of like fair game for companies that are aggregating it. But if you are behind the login, so there are companies that have gone against LinkedIn terms of service and scraped LinkedIn data that you need to be logged in to access. Well, that's not okay because that is against the terms of service of using the LinkedIn platform. So you need to really, as a company that does rely on public data, we have to have a very accurate um, idea and also just like an ethical interpretation of how to use data. So we use third parties for most of our aggregation, companies that are very compliant, very transparent about where they get data and that they're only using public data. Um, and we have a lot of policies kind of built in so that people can opt out of things and manage their own profiles and all their kind of public settings and things. So there's a lot of detail to it, but we've learned over 10 years how to navigate those waters.
Have you seen that learning and development, how they can transform and how it can really move somebody from being in a certain position to like moving up in their career? Or do you ever get in touch with those cases, or is it more just like analysis?
I mean, it's all analysis. I mean, so you're asking if I've met people and have stories of people like using it
Yeah.
successfully?
Yeah.
I mean, all the time. You meet a lot of people over 10 years from, from our user base. The people that are really, I find that the most compelling stories, they either come from people who have used it. There's two archetypes that come to mind. The first one is the power users of our tool, and they're usually not using it for themselves, but they almost have started using our tools as like their own secret weapon, and they've used Crystal to like accelerate their careers. So we've got people that work at some of the biggest companies in the world who I've watched their career over like 7, 8 years, and they keep advancing. And they're not using it because they understand their personality that much better, but they're using it because they analyze other people all the time, and they're constantly creating these reports and like sharing them, and they become these like internal guru. So I've observed those people, and I know their names, and I know they love our product, and they've become like close professional allies.
But also like the trajectory of a story, how it can like just with some technical things almost, if you just like break it down and understand your personality better. Okay, so but you say it's changing, like now with AI, how's the industry shifting? How do you think your company will be in like 5, 10 years?
um, I think every software company, and this has been my realization over the last 6 months or so, I think really every SaaS company, so software as a service, is currently at risk of pretty severe disruption. I think that, and that's large scale public companies as well as companies like ours who are small, who have like point solutions, who have been around for a while. And what I mean by that is that the entire premise that software as a service industry is built on, this is a $1 trillion industry. The whole premise is that code is expensive to write, because that's the reason for software as a service. Like when you look at the evolution of it, we started with software that was like on premises. So you had to, well, it started with custom software. So that's the most expensive. Every company gets custom software built for their use case. And then you had on-prem software where it's like, okay, well, as a big company, and this is like the late 80s, early 90s, a big company like Microsoft writes software and then sells the software. And then you go to on-premises and you have to update it over and over again. And the reason for that is because software is very, expensive to code, but they figured out, okay, instead of doing it for a custom company, custom by company, we can consolidate this and build like a factory model where we build all the software in one place with one team, and then we ship it and literally physically distribute it to our customers. And then companies like Salesforce came along, early 2000s, SaaS proliferated, and that made it so distribution became free, and you're able to use that same team of software engineers to reach much more, or a much larger audience, and also update continuously as opposed to shipping an update every quarter or something. So you're taking that same expensive group of engineers and then distributing out the value more and more. So that's the whole economics of software as a service. And then you like layer on actual services to it. And that's been the last 20 years, basically the whole premise of this industry. And that's why it's grown so fast, because the economics are better. Well, all of a sudden, that whole idea that code is expensive to write has just been like radically blown up. Um, Tools built on language models, but you can use tools like Cursor.ai. Um, you can build software and not just like vibe coded random prototypes. You can build like real, robust, functioning, tested software in a fraction of the amount of time, of the fraction of the amount of people. And I've been testing this out on my own to validate it. And it's true. It's kind of mind blowing. So as a CEO of a SaaS company, you look at this, you're like, whoa, software just got, 20, 30, 50, maybe 100 times cheaper to write in terms of actual coding and time it takes. Not that it's going to eliminate engineers, but the amount that a single engineer can do is just exponentially more. That changes all the economics of the whole industry. And I think it's just a matter of time before that like flips it. Um, because it's
It's
just, yeah.
yeah. It's kind of paradoxical because it feels like soft skills is going to be the new like skill that you need, just people skills. And that's what your company does. So in a way, it's like
Yeah. 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 It's kind of weird.
tech, but it's actually the skills that people need. I mean, especially the Gen Zers, they struggle with like just in-person public speaking, like what I do. Okay, so it's changing. So then what do you think, like what's your vision for the company? Like do you want to sell it?
Well, outside of Crystal, I think there's just some general concepts of what to do as a SaaS company in this environment. And I kind of view it as a little bit of a barbell approach. Like, and when things are changing so quickly, um, there's going to be stuff that's rapidly changing, and you need to like catch up with that. And that's on this AI front. So I think every SaaS company on one end of the barbell needs to be investing on the edge. And I think CEOs of SaaS companies should try to build their own competitor. They should try to look at their entire market and their product from the ground up and say, if I was a random Gen Z who was just graduating college and just had all the time in the world and all the AI tools in the world right now, how would I build a product that beat ours and was better than ours? And chances are it's possible and very feasible. And there is that random recent college grad who's probably looking at your company now and doing that because they can. So if I'm a CEO of any SaaS company right now, I am actually going to try to build my own competitor, the competitor that's keeping me up at night, because they're out there and that's happening. I've met them. There's this whole crop of new, you can call them like vibe coders, but they're like just young, hungry engineers who are digital or AI native, and they are coming fast after this industry. So that's one end. I would say building your own competitor. So we're actually doing that at Crystal by launching this new product, Premeeting. Totally AI native product that is kind of starting with the building blocks that we've built, but also is looking at the market from totally first principles. Now, on the other end, you have to look at, okay, if that stuff is changing radically and there's so much risk and so much change and so much disruption, what is not going to change? So I think you're instilling like those foundational pieces. It's going to be different from company to company, but for us, I look at it as company like values, like the people and the culture that we build on, and I look at it as our finances, so our treasury. So I made the decision a few years ago that as a company with so much changing and so much like, and also like the in our financial system changing, that we were going to shift to a Bitcoin strategy as opposed to keeping our treasury and cash and everything. Because Bitcoin is kind of proven to be a very, very, it's not stable in terms of price, but in terms of the actual underlying technology is very stable, does the same thing over and over and over again every 10 minutes. And it's proven to be a really solid foundation financially for our company to build on. So that is more of a solid rock that's sitting at the center of our company. And if you can understand the difference between volatility and risk, you can start to see like, okay, this thing is actually amidst all of the deflationary pressure that's happening around us. Like, and by deflationary, I mean the cost of software and the cost of building software going down, and that really radically disrupting our business in unpredictable ways. We have this extremely predictable thing sitting at the core of our company, which is actually growing year over year and is giving us this like, it takes the pressure off of figuring out how to completely change her company. So you ask this question of like, what do I want to do with my business, and this take to get personal with it. Truth is, I don't really know. it's it's exciting to be in it because Crystal, you kind of alluded to it. We're at this unique point where there's actually a brand new demand for these types of tools to help people communicate as people. So I know that it's evolving. I just can't really predict where it's going to go. I just feel like it would be a bad time to sell the company right now because we're going to end up naturally in a place that people are coming to us, and we're starting to see that already.
How much do you invest in like research and development?
We invest a lot in it, just in terms of actually building. Our engineering is kind of half our company, so we build a lot. But the thing is, right now, one of the best parts of these AI tools for building is prototyping really quickly and building things quickly. So as before, again, look at how this whole market flips. When things like code and design and actual like building infrastructure are expensive, you need to do a lot of research beforehand because you don't want to put all this investment into building something that ultimately no one really wants. That's kind of like the whole lean startup methodology. But things are so different now. It's totally flipped. It's actually quicker for me to build a prototype and just get it in front of people, get them using it. And it might not be fully fleshed out or fully feature ready, but it's good enough to work. And I can see if people use it or not really quickly. So it actually almost, it like significantly diminishes the need for all of that upfront planning and all of that upfront research, because the stakes of launching something that people don't use are just much lower, and you can do it way quicker. So in my view, if I was launching something brand new today, I would just be building. I would just be building really quickly. Within a couple days, get something out to market, test that out, see if it worked, see if it didn't, iterate, just go through that process of like staying really, really tight on the development cycle. And where it's something that might have taken months before is now just like kind of taking a matter of days. It's not like an AI can, that's where people also get this conversation kind of confused, because AI is not doing the work for you. It's just, if you know how to use these tools, it can speed up a months long process into a matter of days. And I would be doing that. And that's kind of what we're aiming at with our business as well. It's just like moving quickly and getting things in front of real customers as fast as possible, as opposed to sinking all this time into like traditional art. Yeah.
So what do you think people want like now that's different to what they wanted 5 years ago?
See from our customer base, years ago, people were always trying to use our tools for like the very top of the funnel, like and a lot of times it was like targeting new people, making new connections. They always wanted to like play the numbers game, get more people in the top. In that sphere, I'm definitely seeing a lot more now where it's actually more about separating the signal from the noise, where it's not so much like increasing the volume of leads or the amount of people that come into the top of in top of a sales funnel. It's much more about like improving quality and effectiveness and conversion, things like that. So I think that's an economic factor. It's also because like automation and AI have created a ton of like noise, and like emails kind of breaking, cold emails kind of breaking as a mechanism. So that's the first change that came to mind, because our customer base is a lot on the go-to-market side. It's the focus away from that numbers game and more towards like quality and effectiveness, thinking like, okay, how do we actually work with the people that we have in our funnel and help communicate effectively.
How's it played out in your own life? Like, has it helped you?
I hope it's helped me. Yeah, it's kind of a lens. It's a lens on looking at your relationships. You can't unsee it. It's like once you kind of identify this and you realize, okay, there's definitely behavioral tendencies and patterns that you can come across. I notice in my life, and then I notice in the relationships and the people around me. Like, for example, everyone in their own family understands these dynamics that happen. So I know what happens in my family, like between the differences that have been, there forever. I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and my youngest brother is basically my personality traits, except extreme. He's very similar to me in certain ways, but just pressed up. Maybe I'm a 7, he's like a 9. And thus the moderating influences that I have, he maybe doesn't have. So I understand how he thinks very well. Meanwhile, my other brother, my middle brother, we think very differently. It's always been that way. He's way more like pragmatic than I am and more detail oriented, a little more like behaviorally conservative. Um, and it's just really funny how that dynamic has always existed and been there. And if I wasn't aware of the personality differences there, I would just tell you, oh yeah, I can connect more with my youngest brother because of that. But that's not the case. I connect with them like equally, but because I'm aware of the differences, I know I know how if our communication style between those two relationships is very different. And we speak in different ways with different medium. Like I always describe it this way. And yeah, this is very personal like just family dynamics between like me and my siblings, but I find it to be true for a lot of people. My youngest brother, we have random phone calls. My middle brother, we text message all the time. And my sister, we basically just like see each other in person and communicate very directly. And it's really funny. Like three different people, they're all my relationships, but communicate three very different ways. And that's how I build relationships with them. It's like my sister, I just got to do in person because texting is just, we basically are just a direct message of logistics. But it's very good between that and my brother. So I think people, if they adopted those, you can take that from work, family, your marriage with your partner, whatever. Like these things really do help because I think they eliminate friction and frustration that could otherwise be there.
So what can people do now to engage with your new product?
So we're in a process of, we're in beta in Premeeting. So it's just on premeeting.com. Premeeting. And you can get these meeting reports and you can hook up your calendar. So if you're in Google or Outlook, you can connect your calendar and then start getting these reports automatically. So it's kind of the equivalent of having a research assistant sitting, with you, and then they're sending you a report an hour before the meeting. So you can do that right now. And if anybody wants it, they can reach out to me and I can hook you up some extra credits because we're trying to get some good feedback on the product.
Awesome. And by the way, how did you come up with the name Crystal Knows?
I come up the same with Premeeting. I just knew, for some reason, names come to me before businesses. Like I just knew I wanted to call a company Crystal way before the business. So I just had it in mind, and then I had a business idea that kind of fit it. So there's not a really great story to it.
It's not a crystal ball.
No, unfortunately, people interpret it that way. I always thought about it more as like crystal clear, like crystal clarity. Yeah, but no.
Using nuance to get people on a better way of thinking of personality. Well, thank you so much. I actually really wanted to address this topic, especially of astrology, for a long time, but I don't know what it's going to take for mainstream to actually shift the way they talk about personality. And well, Drew, thank you so much. Go check out Crystal Knows and the new products, premeeting.com. Thank you for being here on the Mother Africa Show.
Absolutely.
Mm.